What's up guys, Kazungu here and welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today I want to go over the hot weapon that's dawning, the Glacioclasm fusion rifle. I'm going to go over the best way to farm this weapon, as well as what I believe to be the god roll of this weapon, and I'll also compare it to the other fusion rifles that it's competing with currently, and give you my overall thoughts on it. Before we get started though, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for 250 subscribers. I'm really excited by just how fast the channel has grown in just a couple months. Thank you so much again, and let's talk Glacioclasm. The Glacioclasm is a high-impact frame fusion rifle that was first released in last year's Dawning, but it didn't make a huge splash at that time owing to how weak fusion rifles were in general until very recently. However, in this year's Dawning, Glacioclasm also got some new perks that people have been talking about, specifically Subsistence, Slide Shot, and Reservoir Burst. It still only drops from Dawning gifts, but there are now easier ways to get this weapon using those Dawning gifts. I recommend buying both the Perky Presence and Perkier Presence upgrades from Ava Levante in order to have a chance of getting an extra perk in each of the last two columns. You can also focus your presence by using Ava's Unity Gift Exchange purchase and 5 Dawning Spirit in order to guarantee that the present will drop either the Avalanche Machine Gun or the Glacioclasm. As a result, this weapon is significantly easier to farm than it was last year, despite still only dropping with Dawning gifts. For this weapon in PvE, it has also improved vastly over last year's version, primarily due to the addition of Reservoir Burst and a couple other perks. Reservoir Burst, after finally being reissued on fusion rifles, has become one of the best perks on fusions, allowing for a fusion rifle to be used to clear large groups of enemies with the first shot in its magazine. It also gives a slight magazine increase, as well as a 20% damage buff to the first shot in the mag. However, the bonus damage and explosion perk are lost if the magazine is no longer full. And that brings us to Glacioclasm's main strength, which is the fact that it has two different column 3 perks that are able to keep the magazine full at just about all times. Both Subsistence and Slide Shot are pretty solid on this weapon, since they can allow for a near 100% uptime of Reservoir Burst's damage and explosion bonus. I am going to recommend using Slide Shot over Subsistence on this weapon for a couple of reasons. First, Subsistence requires a kill in order to get the reload. If you miss or just hit an enemy that survives the first burst, then you're stuck having to go through Glacioclasm's long reload to get Reservoir Burst back. Slide Shot, however, is much more consistent, since missing a burst or having an enemy survive your shot is not that big of a deal, since you can just slide to reload and immediately receive your Reservoir Burst bonus again. Slide Shot's very short cooldown is also just long enough that you will always be able to slide after firing due to this weapon's long charge time. As for battery perks on a god roll, I just recommend anything that does not further increase the magazine size, since with Reservoir Burst you will have 7. If you have one that increases your magazine, you'll have 8, and you will not be able to use Reservoir Burst as deep into your reserve. But if you want a specific battery perk that I recommend for a god roll, I'd say I guess Liquid Coils is probably best, since it does give a slight buff to impact. And in my opinion, for this weapon, barrels will not matter in PvE, since, fusion rifles don't really need a specific barrel in PvE. For PvP, I'll recommend Hammer-Forged Rifling, Projection Fuse, Under Pressure, or Slide Shot in Column 3. And I'd recommend High Impact Reserves in Column 4, preferably with either a Ranged Masterwork or a Stability Masterwork. Personally, I don't think it's that amazing in PvP currently, and I would definitely recommend either a plug one or a main ingredient, but this weapon is most definitely usable. However, for me personally, I will be sticking to my main ingredient instead of using a Glacioclasm going forward. The other thing that I want to compare this weapon to is its main PvE competition, Null Composure. Not necessarily for boss DPS, since both Null Composure and Cartesian Coordinate both do much more boss DPS than Glacioclasm, but I will be comparing Glacioclasm and Null Composure as a Reservoir Burst general use fusion rifle. We'll be ignoring Plug 1 here, just since although it is solid, I think that Null Composure is better now after the fusion changes at the start of Season 15 than Plug 1 as a PvE Reservoir Burst fusion. So I tested both of these fusions against the Colossus and the Nessus Lost Sector with Reservoir Burst active, but I did not have Particle Deconstruction on my class item, since I just wanted the fusions on their own here. Glacioclasm hit for 5 bolts, dealing 8,940 damage each for a total of 44,700 damage, and Null Composure hit for 9 bolts, dealing 4,245 damage each for a total damage of 38,205. So from this we find that Glacioclasm is more damage per shot and it does have more range, but it will carry less ammo than Null and as a result will probably do less total damage. It also has a higher uptime of Reservoir Burst with Slide Shot or Subsistence, but it has a slower reload by a long shot. This slow reload hurts this weapon if you have one that has Subsistence. Not necessarily for Slide Shot, but for Subsistence, the slow reload speed is definitely in the negative category. Null Composure, on the other hand, has higher boss damage potential, higher damage per second, and a much deeper reserve, as well as better reload speed. Null, unfortunately, has worse stability and range, as well as worse one-shot damage, but these aren't necessarily deal breakers, as evident by the weapon's current popularity. I think that if you're going to go for either of these, that Null is definitely better if you're going to possibly be shooting at a boss, but Glacioclasm is definitely better for just general use, trying to take down yellow bar enemies and things like that. However, I think they both have their own niche, and I think they're both very solid. So, is Glacioclasm worth farming? I do think it is. I like it a lot, and it is the only high-impact fusion capable of rolling with Reservoir Burst currently, making it, in my opinion, the true successor to Loaded Question, which was a high-impact fusion, since now Glacioclasm is the only Reservoir Burst fusion in that archetype. Plus, the fact that the slide shot roll is so consistent make this, in my opinion, the best Reservoir Burst fusion rifle for running and gunning, which is amazing when you're using something like Sleeper, 1000 Voices, or Galahorn as your damage weapon, or if you're just in a situation where you don't need to shoot your fusion rifle at a boss that often. I definitely really like my Glacioclasm, and I will be using it going forward. However, that is all I have to say about the Glacioclasm today, so if you liked this video or found it helpful, remember that a like and subscribe go a long way to helping out the channel. Follow me on Twitch too if you feel like it. I'll have that link in the description as always. Once again, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for 250 subscribers, and I will catch you all in the next one. Later, everybody.